welcome back to Miniature Odyssey, another hobby update. It's been a couple of weeks. I'm still working on the painting video because it just took more time than I thought, and I'll put a video out when I'm happy with it. Obviously, summer here as well. It's been hot. There's been some days where I've thought, I'll make a video. Never realised I actually look like a hot, sweaty mess, and I don't want to be on camera looking like that. So, yeah, and it's nice to be out in the garden doing other things, and sometimes painting when it's really hot is just a pain, isn't it? But I have got some stuff done. What I'll do is I'll show off the bits I've done. It's not a lot. I've finished some Jagdpanthers, and I'm just working on some basing for some 10mm Panthers as well. So if they're done by the time I come to edit this, I'll put it at the end of the video. Again, 3D prints. And that's pretty much all the hobby I've got completed over the last 2 weeks, 10 days, whatever it is. My approach to hobby is I've started loads of bits in between. I've primed up a few 10mm Germans. I've started putting together some miniatures for the Conquest skirmish game that I'm going to be having a go at soon. Well, when I get stuff painted. There's just been lots of little bits, and it just means that I'm not someone for getting a massive lot of stuff done week in, week out. I'm someone that goes, I've done a bit of that, I've done a bit of that, and when it's all done, it'll all come together, and I'll have more stuff done at once. So that's what I've been up to. Bought a few paints and varnishes and that actually when I come around to do some more painting stuff, I'll show off, say whether I'm happy with them, whether I'm not happy with them, and then also I've got some thoughts on Epic Hail Caesar to share. So I'm not going to do an unboxing, but obviously, as with loads of other people, this arrived in the post yesterday. I bought mine from Goblin Gaming. Really good price. Arrived absolutely fine. Delivered via Amazon, actually, which is quite handy. And I just went for the Carthaginian starter force. So I'm never going to get 2 full armies done with the amount of stuff in the big box. And I didn't want to invest that much into it. Obviously, you may have seen, I would assume, if you watch this channel, there's no way you haven't watched Seventh Son's channel, and you'd have seen that we played our first game with Epic Hail Caesar. I have a few thoughts on it, a few things that I'd like to do with my miniatures when I get around to basing them up, and that to make it appear how I'd like it to appear. So I just think I'll share a few thoughts about the Epic system, I guess, and what I'm planning on doing with the figures that I've got. So, I guess addressing the elephant in the room, we all know you don't need to be using Epic figures to play Hail Caesar in small scale. I've got a collection of 15mm Gauls and Caesarian Romans that I've played Hail Caesar with, using the standard rules. I think, yes, I adjusted the measurements by 2/3 if I remember rightly. I played a couple of games of that. It's Hail Caesar. Changing the size of the miniatures doesn't change how the game plays. Obviously, having played the game with Martin, I hadn't actually looked at the new rulebook because he was the one that had it. Obviously, I've got a copy now. I don't think there's anything different in there that's specific to the size of the miniatures. Only thing I did notice is they've changed a few of the diagrams to match up with the way the bases are set out. Yeah, playing in a small scale is not a new thing for Hail Caesar. However, obviously they've released it with this style of sculpting miniatures, and I will say what I really enjoyed was the look of the game. And it wasn't because there's more troops on the table as such, and it was the depth of the bases being smaller meant that you felt like you were moving further, especially with cavalry. Now, so when we play, I think normally our cavalry bases are 40, 50, maybe even 60mm deep, depending on how we base them up. What's that in inches? 2.5 inches. When you then move 12 inches or 9 inches, the unit's gone 9 inches. When you move, these bases are 20mm deep. When you move 9 or 12 inches, you've moved the same distance. However, proportionally to the depth of the unit, it feels like you've moved further, and you get more of a sense of sweeping maneuvers, maybe, when you're, especially when you're moving cavalry around. There was a part in the game where I'd moved some cavalry around the flank, and it really felt like I'd made a big grand maneuver trying to go around the flank of his army with my units of cavalry. It didn't change the mechanics of the game at all. It just simply changed how, I guess, you were perceiving the game on the table. Again, you could do this with 6mm troops, 10mm troops, 15mm troops, 20mm troops, just on smaller bases. But they've released these miniatures that are based up that way and in the strips, and it just makes it easy to do. You know, it's a one-stop shop, isn't it? Thoughts on the game that we had after was we both love Hail Caesar in 28mm because we love the characters. So, obviously, when we play Wars of the Roses, I mean, everyone knows how into that Martin is, and the detail that he's gone to. We're trying to make lords feel or reflect that, maybe reflect a bit of their character on the tabletop. You have the liveries, the flags, and it suits at 28mm when you're basing these, these figures up, creating the mini dioramas and interesting compositions, even with 4 or 5 figures on a base. You're really giving that unit character. I'm well aware there's plenty of 15mm sculptors and 20mm sculptors where you can buy ancients that have character and motion to the figures and things like that. But that's not what we were using. We were using the epic figures, which are based in the strips. And we did think that you lost a certain element of what we really enjoyed about just the way that our armies look on the table, was you lost an element of that. Oh, that unit is very individual. It became a case of, again, you're stepping up a level, aren't you? But it became a case of, right, that Roman unit looks like that Roman unit, and that Carthaginian Libyan heavy infantry look the same as that one, barring some shield designs and things like that. It meant that the character of the armies became in how they were formed up, because we had more units on the table. I think normally when we play, we have 10 to 15 units on the table side maximum, and 15 would be quite a large game for us. I think we had, I can't remember now, 20 units aside, I think it was. Let's say it was 20 units aside. Can't remember if that included the skirmishers or not. And there was just more on the table. However, the table, it felt like an ancient battle, because what you could really do with the size of the bases being shallower, that's the word I'm looking for, is you could have reserve lines a lot easier. We don't ram a table when we play 28mm. We put a lot of terrain down. We use a sensible amount of units so that there is room to manoeuvre and things aren't just wall to wall from one edge to the other, because that doesn't give you a good game. What you can do in this scale easier on your standard 6x4, probably even 6x3, is you can have multiple lines. So you can have a line of reinforcements behind, or 2 lines. So you can get units on the table, still have space to manoeuvre, and they just take up a bit less space. Again, it's just common sense, isn't it? There's nothing groundbreaking in what's come out. It's just suddenly becomes something that's in focus and maybe a bit more accessible with this one-stop shop. So, I mean, that's the thoughts I've had after the first game of, it's still Hail Caesar. It's just a slightly different feel, and for me, I think it really suits the period as well. Though at the same time, I'd probably love to paint up a few 28mm Carthaginians, maybe, but maybe for a skirmish game of some kind. I've got a few thoughts about how I'm going to base mine. Now, I know I've just said about having the shallower bases leads to being able to, have more lines on the table, and it feels like the troops moving further. For me, they're just a bit too small. I think they are, they're whatever the width are. The width is fine, it's 60mm, whatever it is. And 20mm deep. I think I might go to MDF bases that are 25mm deep, just for that little bit before, behind the troops, just for a little bit of basing to make it easier, to make the bases more visually interesting. And then when it comes to the large warband units, especially the Gauls, what I think I might do, I've got to play around with this as well, is I might, instead of having, so standard unit is 6 bases, sorry, 3 bases, which is 2 strips on each base for non-Roman units. The Gauls being in war bands, for example, are 6 bases for a standard unit, and it's not about stretching the miniatures to go further. You know, they're not expensive. I'm not trying to get more out of it. I don't want to paint that many for one unit. I know it would look good, but I think it becomes a bit unwieldy compared to everything else, which again is maybe what's meant to represent, but it's not quite the look I want. So I think what I'm going to do is standard bases will be 25mm deep by the same width, just for a little bit of extra depth. And then for the warband units, I think I'll go to say 40mm deep or 30mm deep, but put 3 ranks on it, a bit more spread out. So they'll take up the same amount of space as a standard unit, but with more barring 10mm of depth, but with more figures put on the base. So an extra 50% on the base. So the unit will noticeably have more figures in it, but in the same space. And I think that's the look I'm going to go for when I do the allied contingents for the Carthaginians. Yeah, that's just my thoughts on the epic so far and what I want to do with it. I've got a few ideas regarding campaigns that I'd really like to do, using the map from the Hannibal board game as a basis. But that's something that will come later because I always have these grand ideas, but I've got to actually do it first, haven't I? So yeah, just a few thoughts on Epic, a few thoughts on the game we played, what I'm going to do with the miniatures. For what they are, I like the miniatures. I think they are the nicest ones of all the Epic stuff they've released. I don't think there's any particularly bad ones. Obviously, again, they're 15mm plastics. You're going to have the odd, especially they are slightly flat. You're going to have slightly weird undercuts in places and infills. Just what happens. Leave that bit black. Again, that is the benefit of the miniatures. No one is looking at them that closely. It's about how it looks as an army on the table. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Epic and what I'm going to be hopefully starting soon. So what I'll do now is I will flip the camera around and show off some Jagdpanthers that I finished. Again, 10mm print. 10mm. I'm printing all my tanks at 1/150th scale, so they match up with Pendraken, so I can use Pendraken vehicles as well. So I've got a few Jagdpanthers to show off, and then, assuming I get them finished today, there'll be some Panthers to show off as well, and that'll see the video out of what I've been up to over the last couple of weeks. So here we have some 10mm Jagdpanthers that I've just finished, got based up. They are 3D prints, again, using the Bergman files that are available for free on the internet. Printed at 1/150th scale, so they'll match up pretty well with Pendraken miniatures, because I'm using a few of their vehicles as well for some of the more specialist things. These were... I paint most of my vehicles the same way. These are painted up using the new style MIG ammo paints with the flip caps, and I stopped using MIG paints before because I found that, I don't know how to describe it, they're quite plasticky, and getting a smooth coat with them was sometimes hard, and then I'd find that they really weren't very resistant to the weathering systems that I use using oils and amals, etc., even with varnish over the top. So I was intrigued to see what the new reformulated ones were like, and they were better. However, I still had issues with the base coat lifting slightly, even under varnish, once I started putting thinners and that over the top of it. And it's the Atom range that I'm on about, the new ones. Now, the colours, really nice. So I used their Dunkelgelb, their late war Dunkelgelb as the base colour. Slightly different shade again to what I'd normally use with the AK Real colours, but came out really nicely. And then I used their green and brown over the top for the 3-colour camo, and then just finished off in the normal way. So yeah, that's 3 Jagdpanthers ready for Normandy and ready to hit the table when I actually get around to finishing enough infantry to play a game. So this is the 5 Panthers done. Again, they are 1/150th 3D prints using the Bergman files. So again, mixed up the colours slightly compared to the other things I've done. So the base colour for these was AK's Real colours, which are my favourite colours to spray. But this time I used their Nackmuster Dunkelgelb, which is a richer, more mustardy yellow. It just gives a different tone to the vehicles compared to, say, the Tigers, which used the late war, more pale Dunkelgelb colour. Again, weathered up with oils, enamels, a few weathering powders, nothing too complicated. Not done nice and quick. And first time on these, I used new varnish. So if anyone cares, it's VMS matte varnish acrylic, because I've had issues with the AK and MIG varnishes. They're just not tough enough for my final layers of weathering over the top, and they end up lifting no matter how long I leave them to cure. I don't think it's a fault of the varnish. It's not what they're designed to do. But I do steps after I matte varnish, so I need something that's going to stay in place and also not react with the enamels and oils that I put down beforehand. So that VMS varnish seems to be pretty good, and I'll probably be using that from now on. The decals for these are a new set I've got from sold by Pendraken. So the decals for these are a new set I've got, which are sold by Pendraken, and I hadn't seen them before, so I went on the site recently, and they're from a company called Scale Model Specialties, rather than the normal I-94 decals they sell, and they're larger sheets, reasonably priced, and you get a lot on there. So for example, this set was 1943 to 1945 Panzers Part 1, and the decals are based off photos, so there's, and the colours that we know units use. So for example, this set of numbers was the first company from the 9th SS Panzer Division. There's decals on there for the 9th Panzer Division, the 6th Panzer Division, in multiple sets. So for mixing up your vehicles, it's a really good set. I'd recommend anyone has a look at them. Yeah, that's more Panthers done. Got a selection of heavy metal done now for the Germans. What I need to do is do some Mark IVs, Stugs, get my company of infantry done, and then we'll actually be ready to get stuff on the table.